Breakers, welcome to the live stream where we are going to be interviewing my good friend and Rebel Squad colleague, Mr. Paul Harris. So Paul is waiting in the wings. He's just managed to sail through the door at the last minute, bless him. He's fully committed to the cause, and he has driven safely, I am sure. Apologies for the squeaking in the background. That's Percy with his toy, because of course he's left his toys alone all day until I've gone live. So I'm going to bring Paul into the stream now, and we'll see what happens. Hey, here he is.
Hi. I was just thinking, should I be squeaking? Have something squeaking in the background. Good old
I do tend to squeak and creep these days, but not by,
we won't go there, Emma. We won't go there.
Once, really. It's just age, isn't it? So we've already got some people online. Percy the Post didn't. Oh, yeah. Hi Nadia, hi Lisa, hi whoever else we've got. I can't see your names yet. Welcome if you are watching us in the Rebels and Rule Breakers Facebook group. If you are watching us elsewhere, i.e. on LinkedIn or my personal feed, then also welcome. And if you are not in Rebels and Rule Breakers, come join us. Search for Rebels and with the ampersand Rule Breakers, all one word, and you'll get more of this good stuff. So, welcome, Mr. Harris.
Thank you very much indeed. Being slightly sort of, what's going to happen now? Because
well, we are winging it, aren't we?
We are winging it a little bit, and I apologize for the. I texted you the night and said I think I'm going to be in about 5 to 6, and it was 5:58 when I landed at home, and I didn't speed. I was very sensible. Just pure traffic, really, getting home from Loughborough. So, but I'm here on time.
Good. So you're a good boy when it comes to abiding by good traffic sense, good driving sense. However, from other points of view, you are in fact a rebel, and we'll get into that shortly. So, Paul and I have known each other for a few years now. How many? Can you remember? Maybe.
Well, it's impossible with COVID. Everything's got this sort of 2 to 3 year gap. So I don't know. Did we meet pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID? I don't know. It's a while anyway.
Pre for us, wasn't it?
It was pre-COVID because it was through Trainer Talk. So definitely pre-COVID. It's probably 4 years. Yeah, maybe even 5.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it could easily have been 4, if not more. Yeah,
a while.
Definitely. So, so I'm going to sort of say how you came into my radar, and then you can tell us a little bit about yourself. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So as you said, we met in something called Trainer Talk, which is like a membership and event sort of space for people who were in training careers, which was what I used to focus on mostly in my business. So I was sort of aware of Paul's presence in the world because he was at the time, a big name in the group and kind of an ambassador, and everybody knew who Paul was because he was doing good things. And he was also known as the dude who works with farmers, right? So, which was very intriguing to me. And I went to my first Trainer Talk live event, which had about 60 people in it. It just so happened that I was put on the same table as Paul, and you were sat next to me, weren't you? And I remember you standing up at the end of the day and saying, in that sort of AOB bit, and saying, I'm looking for possible associates. And I had to hold myself back from tugging on your sleeve, waiting for you to sit back down so I could go me, because I knew enough about you and I'd got enough of a vibe from you that day to know that I absolutely wanted to work with you. And it was just so interesting to the concept of you working in agriculture. And I remember when I sat down and said, hey, listen, I'd love to talk about that. You said, oh, actually, that's good because you've been sort of on my radar as well. And then we went and met in a Holiday Inn and had a good chat. And the next thing we knew, we were mates.
Indeed. I'll come back to that in a second. The rebel instinct. Maybe we can suss out fellow rebels, but it was very much an instinctive thing. It wasn't. I didn't know you at all. But I think first thing I would say is that sometimes you just see somebody, you meet somebody, and there's just a little voice that says, you need to speak to that person, And I think it was very much of that with you. It was just, I just got to follow the instinct, really. And the rest is history, as they say.
Absolutely. Now, Lisa's saying such a niche market being in farming, and very specifically, or for the majority of the time, or a lot of the time, it's been dairy farming, hasn't it? So, on that note, tell us about Paul the person and Paul the farm consultant person, and anything else that's important. Give us a positive
Okay, so I think in terms of setting the context for those watching and listening, it's my background actually was sales and marketing. I worked in the corporate career, in the corporate sludge, as you would describe it, Emma, for a long time. I set up my own business in 2009 as a coach. Really, I was doing coaching, and I was really trying to help people which links very much into the rebellious thing we're doing now, coaching them how to set what I call congruent goals. So traditionally, the Stephen Covey thing, start with the end in mind. I actually said start with love in mind, which is your purpose and things like that. Maybe I was a bit ahead of the time in that sort of stuff. But in 2013, I was doing a workshop for Business Link, and there were these two people there from a farming consultancy business who said, that bit you've just done, which is helping us to understand each other, can you come and do that on a farm? And I was in the corporate world. So what do we do in corporate? We wear shirts and ties, and we go in, took my projector and my all that sort of stuff, turned up at the farm looking for the meeting room, and I was taken to a shooting lodge, which I don't really like shooting, and there's this big oak table, and all these burly farmers came in stinking of slurry, and I was there in my suit, and I was thinking, this is not really what I expected. Without sounding really cheesy about it, the rest is history. And I quickly discovered that the people side of farming, that's how we manage individuals and people, just was not really there, and still isn't. So my business Real Success was very quickly sort of pivoted, way before COVID, pivoted into a new direction. And again, it's a bit cliche, the rest is history, is I've just built a business really helping people in the farming industry with their people skills. So stuff that in the corporate world you would consider to be fairly standard just doesn't exist in certain industries, actually, and farming's one of them. It's an amazing industry, whatever your views are about farming and animals and animal welfare and things like that, and there's loads of different views on that. My job is to help them with their people and to help them to look after them more successfully. So that's what I do during the day job, and that's how I've got to know you. In terms of me, I'm just a geezer from Birmingham, as you can tell in my and I'm married to Sam for nearly 1986. What's that? Nearly 30 something year, 30 mid 30s. Stopped counting after a while. And we got 3 grown-up kids, so no grandchildren yet. But and we're at the stage with our lives and my business in particular, where we're about to do a real sort of take off again, and that was really why I wanted to find out these associates. But underneath all of that, which all sounds quite dull and boring, really. There is this rebellious streak in me. And what I loved about when you started to talk about it was rebellion for me I've never been a placard waving, banner shouting sort of protester about stuff. My rebellious nature is always generally to go in the opposite direction, particularly in business. So when I started my first business, and particularly this business that I'm running now, it was always, I don't want to be, and excuse the language, I'm going to use a swear word now. Is any children watching? Please cover your ears. But I also had write a book that said you can be successful in business without being a bastard.
Yeah.
And I think, there've been a lot of people I come across in business that have been successful by basically building yourself on top of other people. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to build a business that was genuine. And this all again sounds a bit cheesy, but it's true. Authentic, which is where the word real comes from. And that real success for me wasn't necessarily a thing. It wasn't something you get to or you achieve. It's something you become, and it's who you are. And that's always been slightly rebellious in its nature, because a lot of entrepreneurship and business is about making money and things like that. And yeah, that's fine if that's your bag. But for me, it was all about this idea of, doing what you love and fulfilling your purpose. So in lots of ways, I've been what I call a peaceful rebellion. And lastly, before I shut up and you can ask me another question,
we're here to hear you.
No, and I think the other thing I would say is that I've always sat on the fence, and we've had this conversation before. That I've always been somebody who was always interested in hearing two sides of an argument. Always got my own opinion. I've got a view on stuff, but I always would find it very frustrating if people just said, "No, this is the way it is," whatever that's about. It could be politics, it could be life, it could be anything. Religion's always a good one. And I've always found myself wanting to hear different sides of an argument. And that's quite rebellious, because people have to say, oh, you're just sitting on the fence. You're not, you've got to come down one side or the other. And in my view, most peace in the world is achieved when we actually sit down and listen to people we disagree with. When we actually do have those conversations from a macroeconomic worldwide level, right down to just your friends in the pub, when we just spend the time to listen to others, we learn more, I guess. So
Yeah.
I've always been somebody that's had views, but never had views that were so intransient they couldn't be changed. And that for me is my peaceful rebellion, is just listen to people. Like we've had conversations about the COVID vaccines and, religion and things like that. And it's like, I'm just curious to hear what other people have got to say. And that often people accuse me then of, well, you're sitting on the fence. No, I just want to listen. That's my thing.
We've said many times as well, sitting on the fence is not an easy place to be. I put out a post maybe a year ago or something like that said, that was around this idea of seeking first to understand and being curious and listening to other people's views, and it riled some people up. People were saying, no, we don't listen to the views of people who gas Jews in the war, and things like that. And whilst I completely understand that and resonate with it in lots of ways, we don't move things forward, and if we only speak to the people who agree with us.
Well, I think you have to have some structure to the world. You can't just say, well, anything goes, and you have to have things that we agree as societal norms. But even those at times, so it's a very controversial subject to talk about the Nazis and the Jews, but in no way it's to go, well, I want to listen to what Adolf Hitler got to say about that. I'm sure he's got some good points. For me, it's always the why. It's behind that.
Yes.
What caused that in the first place? And sometimes when you're talking to somebody who disagrees with you, it isn't the first thing they say. It's what's behind those things that they say. Why do they feel like that? And sometimes when you find out why someone's got an opinion, you can actually understand why they've got the opinion they hold. You haven't got to agree with it. Haven't got to condone it if you don't like it. But actually, why do people do things that they do? That's the bit for me. It's just that willingness to maybe listen a little bit more. Hey, I'm not perfect, I'll sometimes give my view. But I think as I've got older in particular, I'm less interested in what I think and more interested in what other people think. And that often feels quite rebellious, because particularly on social media and things like that, it's just rammed full of people wanting to tell you how to live your life. And I think, we just don't need to do that. What we need to do is just listen to other people about how they're living their lives and understand it from right across the spectrum, from things that we just don't understand.
I totally agree with that. And I think this is one of the reasons why I enjoy doing these kinds of things and some of the other work that I do, because, it's a bit like, I could run a workshop or a coaching model or something, and it doesn't matter. I could do the same thing hundreds of times, but it's always different because there's different people involved, and it has to be, I have to create a space for them to be who they are and hear who they are and hear what they want, so that it creates the right result for them. And I suppose that's one of the reasons why, perhaps I'm hoping it's one of the reasons why people have been attracted to the rebel movement, because what I'm not doing huge amounts of is going in the group and saying what my thoughts are on, and what my map of the world is. And I do some of that, of course, but I'd rather ask questions. I'd rather create a space for people to talk about things and explore some ideas, rather than say, right, this is how you do things, everybody, and this is the world according to Emma. And I sometimes sit there and think, well, maybe, when I look at other group leaders, maybe if I compared myself, maybe I should be in there more often on my soapbox going, right, this is the way it is. But it just doesn't feel right sometimes.
I think, how passionate I am about paradoxes. Paradox is just the power of the paradox fascinates me. And I think maybe where we are now, the paradox of what you've just said is that People don't want people to. We don't want to be preached at, particularly if you look at, just the world of politics at the moment. People are perhaps more disengaged with politicians than they've ever been, because there's a raising consciousness that says we can just spot when people are not telling the truth. And if a leader is spouting something and saying something, and we go, yeah, but I just instinctively know that's not the case. Or I don't mean just bloody Partygate and things like that. I just mean, generally speaking, leadership used to be about follow me and do what I say. Now I think it's much more about let's listen to the people that we're leading and hear what they've got to say. So the paradox of what you're saying is to the, thank you, Nadia, the power of the paradox. Yes, Here we go.
There's a product there in the making, isn't there?
Well, there is, because when you say I'm not putting my views into the group, I want to hear from everybody else. That's what gives it its power. I think the fact that because otherwise all that happens, and there might be some debate and conversation that go within the group. All that happens is everyone just starts arguing, and there's nothing wrong with a good, healthy debate. Don't get me wrong, but that's the difference between arguing. I need to get my point across. You need to understand this is how it is. Yeah. I had a conversation with somebody the other day about feedback, and I was saying that often we say, "I want to give you. Can I just give you some feedback?" Just give you a bit of feedback.
I hate that. Like,
most people go, "Oh no, here we go. What's coming?" Something that begins with a B and sounds like bollocks. But it's like, oh no, you're gonna tell me something. And actually, people don't want feedback. They just want to be heard. They want to be. They want attention. They want listening. They want you to listen to them. And often feedback is just, now listen to me. I want to give you some feedback. You're not doing this job in the way that I would do it. So will you please change? And that's the same.
I think you're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's same a lot in business and at work. Often people say, you're not doing it the way that I want to do it. So I'm going to give you some feedback to say you should do it. Do you know what I mean? Exactly. Yeah. What's that? There's a difference between people who don't want to be preached at. People need, yes. So there are, I'd be interested to know what that person means. I don't know who it is.
I don't know who this is actually. It's not got the blue heart, so I know it's not Jamie.
Yeah. So I'd be interested to know. Expand on that point, because I think there's just this feeling of I want to be stimulated. Maybe perhaps that's what the person is needing. We do need sometimes people to stimulate us and get some debate going. But I just think there's a place for that, and I just feel it's diminishing, and people want leaders to be more open, more vulnerable, more vulnerable and prepared to go, okay, let's have a discussion about this rather than just preaching our particular view.
And it's so, for me, that's so much more energizing. It's one of the reasons I do the things that the kind of interactions we do in Rebel Yell Club, because if I go live in the Rebels and Rule Breakers group, for example, and I want to talk about a thing, it has to be something that I'm really compelled to talk about, because otherwise I've run out of energy listening to my own voice, frankly. And there are some people out there who do brilliant speaking things. You're included in this, actually. Great at doing the speaking thing, maintaining the energy to give that thing out. Now, I can do that in small doses, but actually, it's a lot of push for me. It's a lot of push energy. Whereas I get a lot of energy if I am around people where we are able to have a really interesting conversation.
And I think if anyone in the group is I don't know, Jamie, is if you're a speaker or you're a presenter or you're a trainer and you are effectively giving out some information to help others, people often say to me, "Oh, how do you feel when somebody challenges you?" Well, you've been in my workshop. I say right at the beginning of my workshop, if you don't like what I'm saying or you disagree with it, challenge me, because that then gives it some stimulation.
I love that.
The other rebellious thing is not being frightened of someone to challenge your views, not to therefore give you the opportunity to spout your stuff, but just to welcome that element of, let's debate this, because I always think I can learn something if someone challenges me, because there's no way any of us know it all. So if we can just, and this is all part of the rebellious thing for me, is not thinking that you know everything. And I'm 57 now, and I've been around for a long time. But gosh, I'm learning every single day something about myself, something about others, something about the world. It's just like a constantly evolving process, and I think it's just much more fun. It is for me anyway.
Yeah,
I don't want to agree with me. It's just quite dull.
Well, yeah. And if everyone does agree with you, you're hanging around with too many of the same people. You need to get out there and get out your echo chamber.
It's one of the. It's interesting because in the spiritual community of different types. I'll talk about 2 different types of spiritual community, and I've done everything. I've gone through every ism you can think of, through to religion and faith and all sorts of stuff. And what I found in a lot of those groups where you are, as you say, with people, let's take Christianity, me being a Christian, the danger then is that you're just hearing the same voice the whole time. It's the same when I was in, let's call it the New Age or the more spiritual community. I remember people saying, we don't want any negativity around here. We just want everything to be pink and fluffy. Don't bring a negative vibe into my world.
Spiritual bypassing at its best.
And I get it, but that's not the real world. It's a bit like I couldn't be a monk or a nun. Well, I definitely couldn't be a nun, could I? But I couldn't be a monk.
Who knows, modern world?
Well, yeah, true. Discriminate. A non-binary monk, a non-binary nun. I like that idea. In terms of that sort of environment where you are just so closeted, I don't think it's particularly helpful. So, and I think Cheryl's just said debate is good as long as it's done in the right way, and I think that's exactly it. But we just need more. I was going to say more masturbators, but that's a different. More people who debate in a way that is not about having to be right. And it's, I think, again, one of the reasons why people are turned off by politics, because it's this idea that one side has to be wrong and the other side has to be right. And it almost feels like we've grown up a bit from that now. That's like when you look at politicians now, it almost feels childish that there's people going, well, you're wrong and I'm right and you're wrong. It just feels really immature.
I think there's more and more people kind of like rolling their eyes and, oh God, here we go, sort of reaction, rather than getting kind of sucked into it. Like, it's kind of, do we really need to keep doing this? This is just silly now.
I have no issue with people having different views, take politics, left, right, middle, centre, whatever. Not a problem, mate. People are all entitled to their view. It's the childish way that we say, but for me to be, this is another rebellion for me to be right, you have to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't get that as a concept. For me to be right, you have to be wrong. And that's, to me, where politics often sits. It's for me to have a view that's going to be correct, people are going to support me in, you must be wrong. Well, that isn't the real world, is it? That's not the world in which we live in. And I think, and the business world is a bit like that as well. For my business to be correct and my business to get clients, you've got to be not as good as me. And people say to me about, you've heard me say this about in the farming community, there are other people doing not the same, but similar things to us. And the way they've been brought up is it's about competition. We're all in competition, which immediately suggests there's a finite amount of resources.
There's lack.
You only need to be in competition if there's a limited amount of resources. But, part of my, I suppose, more new age view is this view of abundance, that there is not got nothing to fear for somebody else coming into the market. Might not like it when somebody else does what we do. But if I start going, I've got to tell other people they're not as good as us, that's going into the place of lack, and there's not enough to go around. Whereas, as you know, I just go, come on in. The more people are doing what I'm doing, the more people are going to find out about it. Welcome them in. And that's rebellious as well, because it's like the opposite way around of I've just seen Nadia's comment
about the non-binary nun. I know, it's so funny.
Oh, don't tempt me, Nadia. I might be dressing up as one of those soon. But you get it exactly. The idea of you just don't need to all be competing. So this idea of rebellion for me runs through so much of what I do.
And you know what? What's so fascinating about this for me, Paul, is that when we first started talking about this movement that was emerging for me, you were like, that's great, I think it's really needed, it's really interesting, it's not really, I'm not really a rebel, but I get it, and actually then you've sort of crept further and further into the world, or I've pulled you closer into it, and I think you've realized actually how rebellious you are, haven't you? And you talk
I think when I think back to, you're right, actually. And I think, but I've always been rebellious in the way I've just described it.
Yes.
So one of the very first things I did when I was about 18, and I was the head boy of my school, I did a talk. And at the time I was very, into CND. None of you probably are old enough to remember CND. It was anti-nuclear, all about campaign for nuclear disarmament. But it was always that peaceful thing again. And I would stand on stage and have arguments with, people who were very pro it, but I was never angry. And I sometimes look at people who get very angry, in about stuff. And it was just, I could be passionate about something. To me, passion is different to anger. I mean, let me just be clear. There are certain things we should be angry about in a passionate way, whether that's injustice or starvation, children starving in Africa, whatever it might be, or children starving in this country. We should be angry about that because that shouldn't need to be the case. We should be angry at ourselves as the human race for allowing that to happen. But angry at somebody else because they've got a different view to you, even as extreme as some views can be, just where's that coming from? So you're right. I've always been a bit like that throughout my life. But I think what's really been great about your group, Emma, and this group that we're part of, is we've not sort of hijacked back the word rebellion, because rebellion has been often used as anti-authority
and very forceful.
Yeah, and again, angry, placard waving, and hey, there's a place for that. And if that's your bag, go for it. My peaceful rebellion is the opposite of that. Is come and talk to me. If you're angry about something and my view is different to yours, let's have a brew and talk it through. That rhymes. Let's have a brew and talk it through.
Let's have a brew and talk it through.
And then I think we all learn. And I think you look across the world at most things that have been resolved that have been really awful have been, sometimes, whether it's the things we were talking about before, where you do have to say, no, that's not acceptable. We're all saying that style of being is just not acceptable. But most things are resolved through talking. The crises we got in the world at the moment are only ever going to be really solved. Some of it we have to stand up and say no. We as a collective world think that's unacceptable. But to change it, we've got to understand why people are doing it.
Yeah. And it's such a big, when you talk about the things that, the big issues we need to solve in the world and sitting down and talking about them, that in itself can be very controversial, can't it? Because, saying, well, nothing's ever been solved by war, certainly not without huge cost. But then we also, if somebody's attacking our country, like in the case of Ukraine, for example, you can't just sit there and go, hey, let's have a love-in, it'll all be fine.
And that's why peaceful rebellion is not being a walkover or condoning behavior that we know socially and as humans is unacceptable. So people thinking they can go, whoever they are, whatever country of the world, thinking they can go and drop bombs on people because they want a bit of their land or whatever. We've just got to understand what's caused this. Why are we where we are? In no way condoning it, condemning it, absolutely. That's just condemning it isn't sufficient for me. We need to go beyond that and go, why are we where we are? And then I think I had a conversation with you. When it first happened, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I felt responsible. There's part of me that says, I'm part of the human race. I'm part of this generation. How have we allowed a situation on our planet where people think that's okay? And we can't just go, it's them, it's them, it's them, it's them. It's nothing to do with us. It is somehow, for me anyway. So again, part of rebellion for me is not walking away from when things are happening in the world that we think nothing to do with us. And again, because of the power of the media, we often only see and get fed what's going on. But there are people right now across the planet starving, got no clean water. That's not. That's the African countries because they're all corrupt. But we've got to somehow sit down and talk about this and and face up to the fact that this sounds really heavy. I'm making it sound really heavy now, but it's just that idea.
It's important, though, isn't it?
Of talking.
Yeah.
Actually listening. Actually.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe asking a question to start the listening, and then I just think it's, what we were saying before about almost hijacking back the word rebellion. This has been, quite a thing for people to get their heads around, and continues to be so. A lot of people have said to me, "You don't call it rebels, whatever. All the various things that we've done. Don't call it that because people have the wrong connotation." Yes, they do, and that's what's gonna spark people's curiosity. Because if I go around going, oh, this is the love club, this is the listening club, people are going to go, right, okay.
For me, it's
sometimes you have to be a little bit,
it's the questioning
go out
club.
there. Yeah.
Question everything, question people's motives. It's interesting. I was just trying to find it on my phone. When I picked up my phone, when I left Loughborough to check emails and stuff, and my Facebook thing was up with notifications. It had a memory from years ago that I'd posted, and it was just before the pandemic started, I think. And it was about the Rubik's Cube as a metaphor of, hopefully you'll remember the Rubik's Cube. And it's a pity. I wanted to try and find it. There was 10 points I made about the Rubik's Cube in terms of perspective. And I know Jamie's just been talking about perspective. Is that, to get all of it, the Rubik's Cube, to be exactly right, you've got to change everything. If you just got one side correct, all the others probably are not correct. So to get the whole thing to be, it's all got to work together. And it's a great metaphor, actually, the Rubik's Cube.
That'd be a great thing to drop into the group, wouldn't it?
I'll find it. It was a 10 metaphors around the Rubik's Cube, but it was all this, if your side looks right, that doesn't mean to say that all the other sides are all lined up as well, and all those sorts of metaphors of the Rubik's Cube. And actually the only way we can get it to fit, to all look right, is when we all prepared to change and we're all prepared to move. So just having this one perspective, well, my side's right, I'm fine, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, don't move mine.
And everybody else, don't touch mine. The only way to get all the sides right is when everyone's prepared to move. And that's sort of almost like, what I'm saying in terms of my rebellion is all sides, all views have value. And I'll post the 10 points in the group if I can find it.
That would be really interesting to see, actually. I'd be very intrigued by
it. It's powerful.
Yes, it is. It really is.
Again, or just pushing the metaphor with the Rubik's Cube thing again, does the Rubik's Cube look really cool when just one side is correct? It doesn't. It's a mess. It only looks its best when all sides are working together. Yeah. And if you think about the human race looks its best when all sides are working together, and we're not this whole idea.
Isn't it interesting that once we get it all perfect and aligned, that we sort of have an instinct to mess it up again so we can try again?
Cool. And there are, again, I can push in this metaphor, but there are probably millions of ways to get it to look right. So there's not just one way to make it happen. So that's, for me, the power of this group and the willingness to listen to other people's perspectives and to support each other, just doing our own version of rebellion, which, again, and I have a phrase when, when I'm doing my Vita profiling, which is, of course, all talking about difference, is there is no wrong or right or better or worse. There is just difference.
Yeah.
Wrong or right or better or worse, just difference.
Wrong or right, better or worse, just difference.
There's just difference. And I think, that's the core of my business, really, is Vita profiling. That's it. There's no right. And people often say, but I'm right. My personality style is the right one because it gets things done. No. My personality style is right because I look after everybody. No, my personality style is right because I've got loads of ideas. And we go on like this. No. It's a bit like the Rubik's Cube. It really works when it all comes together. And
that's the beauty, isn't it? Difference makes everything right. And actually that links into what Nadia's asking. So will all sides ever get it together to look and work right? To me, this is quite a spiritual question, actually.
That's a deep question. It's a great question.
Very, very deep. And you mentioned briefly your spirituality earlier, and I want to kind of bring that into the conversation, because I think this has been something I've observed with great joy really in you, is that you have got so much more confident over the last couple of years or so in talking about your faith, particularly in the context of your work. And I also just at this point, before I forget, want to give a shout out to the Divine Business Network that you run, that I take part in here and there. And one of the reasons that I do is because I have deep faith. However, I wouldn't class myself as a Christian necessarily. But you run Divine Business Network with Christian principles, I guess. And one of the things that I love about it is that you say, let's I'm gonna get the phrase wrong.
Lay down your doctrine.
Lay down your doctrine. Lift up your faith.
Yeah,
That's it. And I love that because I feel really safe in that environment. I don't feel like I have to be of a certain religion or know strict scripture or anything like that.
Well, I mean, again,
listen to each other.
I love paradoxes, and again, I'm a rebellious Christian as well, because I hate religion, and I think, to me, religion ruins most things because it preaches. It says this is a set of rules. It's like a tick box exercise. You got to tick this. If you do this, then you're okay. That's not faith or spirituality to me. I'm a Christian because I was born in the UK. My mum and dad took me to an Anglican church. If I'd been born in Saudi Arabia, I could be a Muslim. If I was born in Tibet, I could be a Buddhist. Let's not get hung up on the labels. All the messaging of spirituality and most faiths, when it's not corrupted and twisted, is the same. Love thy neighbour. He who has no sin cast the first stone. All those things that you hear that Jesus says.
Try not to kill each other.
Yeah, it's not rocket science. I find that as a framework and as a discipline is helpful to me. But to me, let's not get hung up on the names, the labels. The reason I do it in business is because, again, the rebel in me wants to hold people to account who say on a Sunday, hey, I'm a Christian, I'm a really decent person. And they go to work on a Monday and act like an arse. Yeah. No, you can't do that. You can't claim to be something and then act like something else. So what I'm saying is, if you're of any faith, that's why I call it Divine Business Network, not Christian Business Network. If you're of any faith and you say you are trying to uphold principles, and that's on a Saturday or a Sunday when you go to your mosque or your church, and then you go to work and you just behave like an absolute idiot as a leader, as a boss, as a colleague, then that's not active faith. So I talk about, let's take Sunday into Monday. Let's take those principles of spirituality and bring them into our workplaces. That's what Divine Business Network is. And that to me is quite rebellious, because it's like, it's not conforming. I don't conform to the traditional Christian. I really struggle with the concept of God. I can get what Jesus said. I thought he was quite a cool dude. But, in terms of the rest of it, it's all a bit, but what it does, it gives me a framework to be a better person. Now, if you've got no faith at all and you've read a great book by Stephen Covey and that's made you be a better person, or you've read Lion, Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, and you've read a book and it's made you a better person, great.
Yeah.
That's what you need.
It doesn't matter what vehicle took you there. It's the intention, and it's the, it's not even a destination, is it? It's the continuous journey.
Which is, just go back to Nadia's question, which I thought was a really cool question. Will all sides ever get it together to look and work right? So what my answer to that would be no, because it's not, in terms of the Rubik's Cube, if you think about the game of the Rubik's Cube, it's not the finished article that's the fun. It's the getting it together. It's the working at it. It's the twisting. It's all that bit. So we learn when we're doing the game. We don't learn at the end. That's my whole thing about goals. Goals are useful to have, but once you've achieved them, what happens next? It's the process. Success is a journey, not a destination. So the whole thing about the Rubik's Cube is understanding each other, working with each other, listening to each other. That's the fun. That's what makes us work. The end result, we've no idea what that might look like. But if we're prepared to work together, I'm sounding like a bloody politician now, but if we're prepared to work together in the game, that's where we get things better. It's when we say, no, I've got it sussed. I know the answer, which is what religion often does. That's the answer. This is it. In a box.
Yeah, do what we say. Here are the rules. If you follow these rules, you'll be right. And you'll be,
I can't sign up to that.
Sent to a good place.
So you're right. The more I'm talking about this, the more rebellious I'm feeling. I'm feeling quite anarchistic.
And I do. It's been joyful for me to watch you embrace that. To openly talk about it, and actually to in the right context to put be open about that in your work as well. I think there's a lot of people that hide it because it's maybe people will judge and so on. And this is a real example of one of the things where you have absolutely become your full unapologetic self. You're kind of like, this is me. I'm not preaching about it. You can be what you want, and I'll hear it and embrace it, and we can be pals and all the rest of it. This is how I do it. tell me about how you do it. You know, that's kind of the deal, isn't it?
It's points of reference, isn't it? We've all got them.
Yeah.
What are our points of reference? Why do we believe something? Why do we think something should be done in a particular way? And yes, sometimes now I will say, look, the reason I do this is because that's what I believe is the right thing to do based on the fact that I'm a Christian. But I say I could have been a Muslim or a Hindu or no religion. It doesn't. I'm just telling people that's why I'm saying what I'm saying. So trying to be authentic rather than saying, well, I've read this somewhere in the Times that it says you should be good. I'm saying this is real for me. It's because I believe that this is what I should be. And I think people are often frightened to be their unapologetic selves. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think we can, you know, as much as possible, being real for me is this word. In fact, you and I had this conversation as well. I think there's a word beyond authentic now. Because people have often used authenticity. I'm just being authentic.
Integrity.
That's the better word though now. Integrity for me is the outliving of authenticity.
Yeah.
So to be authentic, you can say, well, this is what I believe. It's just me being me. Fair enough. I don't give a monkey's.
Yeah, it's almost like it can be like an excuse for bad behaviour, can't it?
It's just who I am. I'm just being authentic. You want me to be authentic?
Shit, deal with it.
Get on with it. I mean, integrity is the outliving of authenticity without harming somebody else. So it's actually saying, I want to be who I am, but being integrous is actually, that's me, but I also recognize that might not be you. And I think that's, again, when you look at politicians and stuff, it's just this whole lack of integrity, you know, in terms of
congruence as well,
honesty and truthfulness. And so that's why, for me, integrity has become quite a big thing. And that's not an easy word to talk about or say. But that, you know, I'm almost rebelling against being authentic now because it's just been overused and people just flip it out with the word.
I totally agree.
And where do we go beyond authenticity? Well, the word I would use, and others may have a different word, is, you know, outliving your authenticity in a way that is not harmful to others. You could just say, well, I'm a fascist. Live it. That's what I believe. You know, tough. That's just me being authentic. Are we okay with that?
I'm racist. Deal with it.
yeah, exactly. You know, it's or any ist, you know, you can think of. It's like, well, the word authenticity and authentic has been sort of hijacked again. You know, exactly. Integrity is living the authenticity. Yeah. Exactly. That's what I think is what I'm trying to say. And I think that's much more powerful now.
Yeah. See, Nadia totally gets this.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's okay, Nadia. Don't worry about using the word authenticity. It's a word that you've got to unpick it, a bit like the Rubik's Cube. We've got to go, okay, what are the sides to that? You know, what does it actually? And I think for many, it's being beyond that. Where can we go beyond authenticity into integrity in our work, everywhere?
I've definitely got a Canva quote brewing here. So integrity is the outliving of authenticity without harming others.
Yeah.
Got that right? Yeah. I'm definitely quoting you there, mate.
Fine. But again, I think that's rebellious.
Yeah, it
is. Because it's saying it's not just okay to say I'm being authentic. It's going beyond that and saying, but not if it harms other people. It's a bit like, you know, Putin probably saying, I'm being authentically Russian. You know, we're protecting our back. You might be, mate, but come on. Look at the people that are being murdered and killed and everything else. That's not authentic.
No. It's like I feel as a species, not a race, a species, that was the right word. We're almost on the edge of needing a new set of language because a lot of the words we've used have been overused, misconstrued, or we don't really have the right words. You know, even when it comes to gender and things like that, we still don't quite have the right words. And it's an interesting one. Now I want to talk more about the farming stuff because I think it's only right if we do our bit for us to do our bit in terms of shouting about how great agriculture is to work within, because it's something that is massively caught my heart, my passion, my imagination, working with you and working with farmers, and that whole community has been massively enlightening to me. I am deeply passionate about it, and I feel very sad all the time that people outside the world of agriculture don't understand and don't realize how magical it is in so many ways. Yes, there's a lot of work to be done. But you know, there's so much good about it, and it's often considered to be the last thing that young people are funneled into if then they're judged as to not be able to follow another career, or it's a last option basically, isn't it?
Yeah,
let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, crikey, you could unpick that its nth degree, but I think where to start with agriculture. I think one of the challenges we have, and is this rebellious? I'm not sure, but is that the general public, me included, all of us, don't really understand where our food comes from, whether it's in the UK or abroad, or how food is produced. We just don't. We just, the amount of young people now, you say, where does milk come from? They'd say Tesco's, and we just think it appears in the soup, or the supermarkets themselves are making stuff. Like car manufacturers make cars, supermarkets make food, don't they? Because it's in their store. So I think we've got a massive education piece, and then there's loads of work to be done. There are issues on the livestock side of animals not being cared for correctly. Absolutely. The ironic thing with the UK is probably one of the best countries in the world for animal welfare, but there's still more work to be done, and in terms of growing crops and stuff, and there's a lot of hard work that goes into producing food. The problem is with what we've seen in farming is they've become very insular and scared, so they don't talk about what they do, so we don't learn about it. So it's a whole self-fulfilling prophecy. But it's one of the hardest working industries in the UK. The hours they work are long and hard. It's 365 days a year. You don't stop. There's no holidays. You take holidays, but particularly if you're a dairy farmer producing milk, whatever you believe about that, and some would say we shouldn't be doing that. I've often said, actually, I have had a couple of conversations, again, in the spirit of talk to me. I've had some really good conversations with animal rights activists, and a lot of what they say is bang on. It's absolutely true. But there's also some things that perhaps we don't always understand. And I remember having one conversation with an animal rights person about, they said, well, look, animals should just be left to roam free. Just to we shouldn't be keeping animals in sheds. We should let cows just be in the fields and they'll all be okay. And actually, when you go down that route, you discover that there'd be incredible amounts of deaths. The population would just explode. You'd have bulls and cows doing things in fields everywhere. Calves they'd just die in fields. And actually, whilst we understand keeping animals for food can be a tricky one to square in our heads, a lot of agriculture and farming gives the animals the best chance of a good life. So you come and have a look at a farm, go to any UK farm, practically any UK farm, and you'll find the animals are better treated than human beings. And I often say to people, when you're in the streets in London or Birmingham or Manchester or Liverpool, wherever you are, what do you do with a homeless person who's sitting on the street begging for food? Often people will say, drug addicts, don't give them anything at all. So we would treat a human being as a piece of dirt on your shoes. An animal, a cow, for instance, is kept warm, it's fed every day. If they get poorly, they get treated, okay. Now I understand the motive for that is because it's a food production unit, but they are looked after. So we actually look after some of our animals better than we look after our human beings. So before you criticize the farmer, just look at yourself and say, what would I do with a homeless person? I'm chair of a homeless charity, so I will always go up and talk to somebody who's homeless and find out why they are where they are. Some of the stories would be terrifying, and have you got somewhere to sleep tonight? So before we judge the farmer, what he does, let's, again, he who has no sin cast the first stone. Let's look at ourselves and say, are we being kind to human beings? Even before we say, are we being kind enough to animals?
I think particularly, that the thing about, most people have no concept of how their dinner lands on their plate, whether it be vegan, carnivore, or anything in between. Tending to the land and the animals that live on it is incredibly challenging. And things like Clarkson's Farm have put a little bit of light on that, but there's so many more issues that need to be.
But again, I come back to where we started this conversation, Emma. I have absolutely no challenge with people being very angry about farming and farmers being very angry that people are angry about farming. The key is to talk to each other and listen. And sometimes what the farming community will do is, we can't talk to animal rights activists. They haven't got a clue what they're talking about. In the same way as animal rights activists won't go and talk to farmers. Some do, actually. I've met some really interesting animal rights activists that have some really good points. And they'll say, why do you have to do that with an animal? Why can't you do that? Bloody good question. Industry, sort that out. Yeah, if we
the thing is, there's not the right kind of conversation. So a client I was working with on behalf of you, for example, one occasion I was there working with them, and there was a little bit of a furore because an animal rights activist had got in with a group of visitors and was live streaming from the milking parlour, which was a nightmare for there. Luckily, they were, quite a big entity, and they had people that could deal with it there and then. But the problem is that that person went in and tried to do it clandestine rather than trying to catch them out, which actually there was nothing to catch out, but actually would have been much healthier to go and say, hey, listen, I'm concerned about this, can you help me understand what's going on here, because this is the perception I've got, right?
What you just said should be recorded. I'm concerned about this.
It is recorded.
Yeah, oh, so it is. Anyone think you know what you're doing? So I'm concerned about this. Let me explain to me why you do that. That's almost like a summary of what we've been talking about for the last 3/4 of an hour in my form of rebellion. Is I don't understand this. Educate me. Help me understand. And crikey, we had debates in our family, I'm sure you all did as well, about COVID and vaccines and whether we should be vaccinated or not. And there was just always this, you are bloody stupid if you don't do it this way. You're stupid to get a vaccine. You're stupid if you've had a vaccine. And this whole idea, I remember being in the garden once with my at a barbecue with my brothers, and one brother was absolutely of one view and another was another view. And I was sort of, again, the awkward place on the fence in the middle, saying, well, both got a point. No, there can't be. It's got to be this or it's got to be that. And I think if it just said, you know what, just
life's not that simple, is it?
Talk to me about it. Why have these situations occurred? I mean, Nadia's just mentioned about being homeless. When you talk to people about being homeless, a lot of the perception of the public, in the same way as there's perception about how food's produced, will say, oh yeah, they're all drug addicts and they're all, whatever. I'd say a very small proportion of people who are homeless have some form of addiction. It could be alcohol, drugs, whatever. The vast majority of sofa surfers, as we call them, young people, have come from situations where they've had to get out of an abusive home, or the family's fallen apart. There's all sorts of reasons, and yet we can so easily judge a situation.
And I think a lot of people think homeless people have chosen to be in that scenario. I mean, I remember my brother saying that he'd spoken to a homeless guy who he saw a lot where he works, in the area we worked in at the time, and this guy was saying, the thing that is most on my priority list is safety. It's not food, it's not hunger and all of those things or comfort, it's safety, because I am exposed to so much danger all the time. And that massively stuck with me from years and years prior to now. And I do my best to never take for granted the relative safety that I've got compared to so many people in so many situations.
But I mean, the YMCA is a really good example, again, of what we've been talking about this evening, is that a homeless person arrives often from one of the councils, or they come to us. Now, if we were to sit and judge, well, you should have done that. Why did you do that? Why did you do that? Why did you do that? No, what they do, there's no judgment. There's just listening and finding out what's happened. There's an offer of help. And the stories, just anybody listening, speak to your local YMCA. The stories of what people's lives can be transformed by just listening to them and helping, not judging, not saying you were wrong, not saying you were an idiot to get yourself in that situation. That's massive for me. And it's always again, that mantra in mine is, hey, and we all judge. I'm no different to everybody else. I will judge unintentionally. Because I'm not perfect, and nor is anybody else. But if we could all just rebel against judgment and rapid judgment, and come to conclusions with people, and just say,
at least be aware of when we are judging.
Yeah,
that's something that I've definitely worked on in the last few years. being aware of those quick decisions I make about people, particularly.
Yeah, and Nadia said even the workers were judgmental at times, because we are. That's what I'm saying. The rebellion for me, the rebellion movement is, how can we be less judgmental?
Yeah.
How can we be more understanding and less judgmental? We all are.
Maybe that's where that starts. This listening thing that we've talked about. Maybe it starts with becoming aware that you can potentially be judging, and to kind of go, okay, let me just put that to one side for a moment. Let me suspend that for a moment and open up a channel to ask a question.
Gosh, I mean, the whole subject of unconscious bias and stuff, we all do it. We've all got so many unconscious
bias. We're wired to do it for survival, aren't we?
So, but if we can catch ourselves doing that, that's another form of rebellion. So rather than joining the group and saying, oh, yeah, just go, well, why am I thinking that? Where's that thought come from? Yeah. Has it come from a good place? Has it come from a whatever? So there are so many ways, aren't there, that we can be peaceful and rebellious, that we, and if protesting is your bag, that's cool. I'll happily, support you for your right to do that. For me, the future and this movement is about encouraging people to stand up for what they believe in, but to also be prepared to listen to when someone disagrees with you.
Yeah.
And that may even occasionally happen in your group, where you get a bit of debate going, and it's this, you don't need to be wrong for me to be right.
Yeah.
That's the key for me. You don't need to be wrong for me to be right. And I've had that conversations with lots of other people in the past who've got very angry about stuff because they feel they've got to be right. Now, again, there are certain standards in humanity that we all agree, I think, wherever we come from, but we still don't live by them. There are still people starving, and we throw food away. I don't get that concept for me.
Yeah, it's weird, that, isn't it? It's just so.
We as a human race, will allow people in one country to starve whilst we're chucking loads of food in the rubbish tip. But that's why we've got to own it. But maybe we're never going to solve all the problems of the world, are we?
Well, Rubik's Cube. So Nadia's talking here about not fitting into people's boxes. So there's so much we could talk about here, actually. So much I could easily get into with you. But let me ask you a direct question about you. What do you think is the thing you've most rebelled against or are rebelling against? What's your personal rebellion, do you think? When you think of, sort of how we can be put into boxes or the rules that...
No, I think, again, I want to go what's instinctively came into my head, because I always say to people, go with the first thing that comes into your head, because that's normally the right one. And I think my biggest journey of rebellion, peaceful rebellion, has been against my own thoughts about myself. How, my thoughts about myself not being a decent person or whatever is actually, that's the thing I'm trying to rebel against the most at 57, is to try and unravel some of the stuff that I've thought about myself. So that's the first thing that came in to my head. And then the second thing I would say is this idea of being in business, not doing the same way as everybody else. This idea of you can be successful but not be a B. And that sounds quite cheesy, but it's just trying to be the best person you can be at work. Because I've just seen so many years of people, forgive my language again, I don't really swear, but just, okay, let me think of a softer word, just being not very clever at work.
Swear if you want.
I try not to, because I don't, but I just think,
that's another self-rule you've got, isn't it? Which is not necessarily a bad one.
It is, yeah. But I think sometimes it's just laziness,
Yeah.
That's your
sometimes
thing.
It feels good, though, doesn't it? If you don't swear a lot, swearing every now and again feels good, and people.
Well, I always say I swear in context. I swear in context. I don't use it as a filler word. But yeah, so my rebellion is let's be, because to me, divinity can be in work as well. And actually, the solution to a lot of the world's problems are in business, not in politics.
Yeah.
In the way that we trade, the way that we run our businesses. And of course, it's mainly a capitalist world. So the way we run our businesses, because we're responsible for people's daily activities and lives, if we did that differently, if we did business more spiritually, if we did business with a bigger heart, would that make a big difference to the world? I think it would. So that's my main course of rebellion, as well as rebelling against any negative views I've got of myself, and the pain and the whipping yourself with your whip is, and some of you may be into that. But anyway, you know what I mean. Is let's rebel against the need for business to be harmful, and to be a force for good.
Oh God, I could talk about this stuff for hours and hours and hours. So let's make sure that we sort of give a signpost for people to get hold of you if they want to, particularly if they know farmers or in agriculture in some way.
Yeah, cool.
Generally speaking, also you have a great website with your blogs and short stories as well, which are amazing. I love your short stories. Oh, and also you've written a book which is freaking brilliant. I know Nadia will and the rest of the Rebels will massively back me up on this. And you've got another book in the making. Tell us about how people can find this stuff and get hold of you.
The simplest way to find us, is through my website, which is www.real-success.co.uk. So real-success.co.uk. You'll find all the details.
Halfway up one, isn't it? Not the underneath one.
It's the halfway up. It's the dash. Yeah, not an underscore, a dash. And on there, you'll find stuff about what we do from a work perspective. You can find a link to my book, Man with Scarlet Socks. If anybody wants a signed copy, happy to send them a signed copy. That's a story about a man trying to understand what real success is, which is cool. Just find me on the website. There's a contact page there. If you want to, just drop us a contact page and we'll get in touch with you. Been cool. I've loved it.
Me too. People, please, honestly, go check out that book because it's one of my favourites. It's the Rebel Squad have read it. We know people who've taken up reading because of it, who weren't reading much before, and it's not just about a dude who's trying to find real success. It's massive life lessons and really important.
Yeah, there is. To be fair, it's called The Man with Scarlet Socks. Just to be clear, The Man with Scarlet Socks. You can find it on Amazon and all that sort of jazz. But if you want a signed copy, go to the website because you can get a signed copy there.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
That's very kind of you to give me the opportunity to mention that.
Oh no, it's the right thing to do, absolutely. So, folks, that is Mr. Paul Harris. We're about to end the show. If you have any questions, though, Paul is hanging out in the Rebels and Rule Breakers, always with us as part of the Rebel Squad. And his wisdom is amazing. If you want to join Rebel Yell Club as well, you will get much more of Paul's wisdom because we have the most amazing coaching calls. And, when you are part of them, people just kind of sit there and tune in because it's just like people are always saying to me in the background, I love it when Paul's on a call because it's just like, oh my God, there's things he comes out with.
Oh, bless you. I'm blushing now, so stop. So it's very kind of you. Thank you very much indeed. And I hope it's helped. If it's just helped one person to think of something differently or to feel that their version of rebellion is okay, then I've done my job in this call.
I totally agree. And that's what we're here for, to do, to have that little ripple effect on people because it has big circles of change, doesn't it then?
Fantastic.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much for everyone who's tuned in. If you're watching this in the future on replay, then please let us know. And if you have any questions or you want to star in a live interview with me or even a Rebel Squad TV live where we all get together in the Rebel Squad and you can be a guest, then just come and shout and we'll make that really fun and really easy for you. Thank you very much and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.